right, hello and welcome everyone. My name is Jesse. I'm here at Command Performance AV in Falls Church, Virginia. I'm here with owner Jeff. So Jeff, why don't you tell everybody, what do we do here at Command Performance?
We are a high-end audio dealer that specializes in high-performance audio gear, some of the finest stuff from all over the world, and we really take pride in the products we sell and what performance they can deliver to our customers.
And that's exactly what we do, and it's pretty cool because we get the opportunity to go and tour some of these things. We actually shot a small video, had a chance to tour Devore Fidelity's factory. We had a chance to actually sit down and ask John to get some insight into the unique world of John DeVore. We got an opportunity to ask him a few questions like how he got started, his design philosophy, even how it was called the Monkeyhaus. The factory in his listening area is called the Monkeyhaus and why. So this video really dives into that. So we shot a short video. This is just the beginning of our trip, and then we dived into the interview with John. So again, thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe to our videos and enjoy.
Yeah, we hope you enjoyed as much as we enjoyed the trip.
Yeah, definitely. Welcome back, everybody. Now we're about to jump into that interview with John DeVore and get some insight. This was a really special moment for us, and I really hope you enjoy. The Monkeyhaus. How did you come up with the Monkeyhaus? Give me a little bit of background there.
Well, all of the speakers are named after apes. So we started out with gibbons, and then we had the silverbacks, and then all the newer ones are orangutans. So I just thought it would be funny. I mean, basically the real reason behind naming the speakers after apes is there's two stories. The official story is that my uncle was a primatologist and blah 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 blah. But the real story is before the company officially started, I was building speakers kind of on commission as Devore Fidelity already, and I built that pair up there. There's a pair of, they're kind of black wedges up in the shadows there. That pair of speakers I built for a friend of mine in the mid-90s, and I called them gibbons because they were really sort of fun and it was just fun. It was funny. And so when I started the company, I went with it, and the idea is it's basically poking fun at the overly serious nature of a lot of high-end audio companies and branding. You know, people that they can't stop talking about the ultimates or the best or nobody can touch this or the X1 Mark 6 V, you know, like, just come on, guys. So it actually goes back 12, 14, maybe 14 years now. The plan, so my speakers from the very beginning have always been very tube friendly, and they've had very even, flat 8-ohm impedances, and they've been fairly high sensitivity for conventional looking mini monitors or tower speakers. But about 15 or 14 years ago, I started off on this path to make a more high sensitivity speaker that was less sort of even-handed. So the 8 ohms is kind of a target to kind of be friendly to all amplifiers, solid state, high power, low power, tubes, single-ended, push-pull. It's kind of like an industry standard modern speaker that most modern speakers really don't hit. They're much lower than that, or they're much more uneven than that. So that was the original design spec 22 years ago when I started the company. But then I decided, so maybe it would be fun to sort of have, as a side project, maybe something that wouldn't sell very much, sort of a more specialized, kind of narrower audience speaker, really optimized for a single-ended amp, more biased towards tube users than solid-state users, for example. So that meant higher sensitivity and higher impedance. So now we're talking about above what is sort of considered the industry standard impedance of the day, so above 8 ohms, and higher sensitivity than the usual sort of high sensitivity target of 90 dB-ish of the time. And so that meant a few things. In my experience, if you're trying to drive it with a single-ended triode, let's just use a single-ended 300B amp as an example. It has to be a two-way. It has to be a one-way or a two-way. A three-way is significantly more difficult to drive for a high output impedance type of amplifier, in my experience. So I knew it was going to be a two-way. I knew I wasn't going to just parallel up a bunch of small woofers, so I knew it had to be a larger woofer in order to get the bass, but also to get the higher sensitivity. Had to be a bigger woofer. So I knew it wasn't going to be a narrow little box like that. So yeah, in the first prototyping rounds, we had 8-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch woofers that we were playing with, multiple companies, and then it gradually coalesced into the 096. The original idea was to have 3 models, and the 096 was going to be the middle model. And so the Orangutan series is all, generally speaking, it is higher than 8 ohms. The 096 is really like an 11, 12 ohm speaker. It's 96 dB for 1 watt, factoring in that impedance, which is not something that's often done in modern testing. A lot of people are doing sensitivity testing with voltage, not with wattage. And if you test it with voltage, they are not that sensitive. But they are efficiency-wise 96 dB. And they sound great with big high-power solid-state amps, but not all of them. Because in my experience, a lot of designers out there, electronics designers, are never testing their gear into a higher impedance than 8 ohms. Very few of them are even testing into 8 ohm speakers. If you look at the landscape of really high-end speakers out on the market, you're talking about, generally speaking, lower sensitivity and definitely speaking lower impedance. Wilsons or Magicos or, the Focals, all those speakers, they tend to need a bigger sort of meatier amplifier with a lower output impedance to sound their best. And that's been a trend for a very long time. And I'm not picking on any specific companies, because those companies are doing an amazing job. They're making great speakers, but it's a different way of thinking than this kind of thing. This way of thinking is leapfrogging back to sort of pre-1960s ideas of systems, where the industry standard for impedance was actually more like 16 ohms, and amplifiers were designed to drive into a load like that. So and before that, the legendary, almost unobtainium Western Electric drivers and things like that from the 30s and 40s, that, if you can find a 755 from Western Electric or a 555 compression driver, those are 24 ohms. So so the trend over 100 years has been lower impedance, lower sensitivity, watts are cheap mentality of boosting the amount of power needed, and so these kind of bucked that trend. And when I started when I started this project to making these higher sensitivity Orangutan series speakers, I figured they were going to be a total footnote. I figured they were going to sell, out of 1 or 2 dealers who sort of specialized in selling single-ended triodes, airtight dealers or Shindo dealers, and really that was kind of it. because at that time there were very few high sensitivity speaker options that were like domestically acceptable, other than buying a vintage pair of Altex or something like that. But you know, the high end market, there weren't a lot of high impedance, high sensitivity speakers out there. There were some high sensitivity, there were low impedance, like an audio node or something like that. But to get that combination in a sort of a domestically normal sized package, it was rare. So I was like, oh, there's a little tiny market for it. Certainly in less than the first year of the 096s hitting the market, it became our top seller, and it has been our top selling speaker for the more than 10 years that we've been making it. So I misunderestimated the market for it. The 096, the first one, was about 6 years to prototype, because it was really a very from scratch process.
Yeah.
The Gibbons speakers that I had designed all sort of came from their predecessors. So they weren't necessarily just like a refinement of a previous model, but they used all these elements from previous models.
Sure.
The 096 it didn't share anything from anything.
Yeah, you built from the ground up.
Yeah, and Seas in Norway builds almost all of our drivers, our woofers and tweeters, to my spec. So I had a design relationship with them over 10 years when we started this project. But they didn't make anything like this woofer. They didn't make anything that was the higher sensitivity or impedance that I was looking to do. And so I was actually working with another very respected, very old driver maker in the UK, and they made all the early prototype woofers. And I showed an early prototype at Consumer Electronics Show. You know, this must have been 2009 or 2010, maybe, probably 2009. And the owner of Seas came in, which he normally would, and says hi, looks at what we're doing with his drivers, and saw that he's like, what the hell is that? Who makes that woofer?
Hey, what is that?
I was like, oh, well, this is different. It's a separate project. Nobody's gonna buy these.
What had happened was
this high sensitivity, and he's like, we can make that. I was like, great, because at that point I was having a lot of trouble. To be fair, the company in question was undergoing some transformations, and they still exist, and apparently they've worked all their shit out, but there were a lot of consistency problems that I was having with the prototype woofers. And so as soon as CES was over, we got online and I talked to the engineers again, and I basically mapped out the targets and what I had found out so far and what I was looking for. And man, the first prototypes that came in were just like boom.
Nice.
And so like 2 generations of prototypes, and we had the production speaker at that
Beautiful.
point. So they make the OREF woofers using parts that we send them. So the bronze stuff, we're doing the bronze casting and machining here in the US, and then we send all the chassis to Norway, and then they build those drivers for us. So the 20s and the OREF stuff is still built in Norway, but with American parts.
So the woofer, because on the website it says it's an untreated German paper.
Yep. Yeah.
So the paper is from Germany, and then Seas turns it into a driver?
Yes. So the driver, building a driver is, companies say, oh, this driver is completely in-house, blah, 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 but almost none of those companies are making their own cones and domes and stuff like that. Some of them are, for sure, some of the ones that really go back a long ways. And Seas is one of the original high-end driver manufacturers. It's actually kind of amazing that, like VIFA and all those other companies, those were like employees from Seas over the years that had kind of taken off and started. But why reinvent the wheel? There's a company, Dr. Mueller, who's passed, but his company Mueller, they make stuff in. I think they're German, but there's also a UK factory as well, and these cones may be actually made in the UK factory. But his company goes back to even before Seas, so they go back to 30s, 40s, I think.
Hmm.
And they made many, many legendary drivers, unobtainium drivers today. And this is one of their magic recipes, this paper. And I knew about it. So this is I specified this paper with Seas. And I knew, because I knew Seas had used these, because there's a famous, there are some famous drivers in the past that Seas had made using this paper. So yeah, that was part of the specification.
You're like, I know what I want. I know what I want.
Yep. And when I first started showing these at shows, there were some, some old timer, same generation as me, or maybe a little bit older than me, speaker designers that I know who I would always see at hi-fi shows. And one of them came in and he looked and he's like, craft paper, yeah. Knew right away the drivers of the material I was using. Yeah.
That's
But yeah,
funny.
Mueller makes 90%. Probably not anymore. There's a lot of Chinese domes out there, but they probably make 75% of the soft dome that are used by manufacturers of tweeters out there. And they make all different kinds of woofers, not just these old school paper woofers. They make all different materials of cones, and they make them for just, driver manufacturers that everyone has heard. You list 10 speaker makers, and most of them will be using some Mueller part.
John, a question we get from our customers, as opposed to the Gibbons, there's no isolation on the stands or the 93s, the little pieces of wood. What's the reason for that?
Tuning. So it's a different approach. It's not that they're not isolated. It's that the tuning is such that part of it is the wood connected to the floor. The ultimate setup for a pair of 096s is the hardwood stands on a wood floor, and then there's the putty that goes in between the stand and the speaker, which it's more of a coupling than an isolation, but it is a little bit of an energy barrier. And then the wood of the bottom of the cabinet, and that is it's a designed system for basically to allow the wave launch of the drivers to dissipate a certain amount of energy and to hold a certain amount of energy so that the speaker works as a system the way it's supposed to.
Almost around and then takes his time. Like the track outside the range, you know what I'm talking about. Just let me know if you wanna